Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at source material that really takes aim at the intersection of Christian theology, American foreign policy, and
Well,
power.
we're about to plunge into the story of Christian Zionism.
Specifically, how a single study Bible, just one book, might have profoundly reshaped the beliefs of tens of millions of American Christians.
And by extension, influenced global geopolitics. Our mission here is to unpack the historical and theological roots of a system called dispensationalism.
Right.
We're going to trace its sudden and massive rise, mainly through the notes of the Scofield Reference Bible, and really examine these serious claims that the system just fundamentally altered the American church's relationship with the modern state of Israel.
And the controversy here is it's enormous. We're talking about a book that's over a century old. The critics are arguing that the margin notes, not the actual Bible text, inserted these completely new theological ideas.
And the discussion gets very heated, especially about the influential figures alleged to have been involved in its creation and its very aggressive distribution around the turn of the 20th century.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Where does this story really begin?
It begins with the Scofield Reference Bible, published in 1901. It used the King James Version text, which everyone knew. But like you said, the power wasn't in the KJV text itself.
It was all in the margins.
All in the margin notes and the subheadings. The core argument in this material is that the creation and the real push behind this specific edition were influenced by very wealthy pro-Zionist figures.
And this was happening right when the modern Zionist movement was just starting to gain steam.
Exactly. The timing is key.
This is where the story of the money and influence comes into really sharp focus. You have this figure, Cyrus Scofield, and by many accounts, he's a relatively minor preacher.
Right.
But somehow, he gains access to the ultra-exclusive Lotus Club in New York City. I mean, he was so comfortable there, he even listed the club as his actual residence in Who's Who in America.
Which raises massive questions. It's all about the figures Scofield was suddenly moving among. We're talking titans of finance, media, industry. People like Carnegie, Guggenheim, Hearst.
And one name in particular stands out, Samuel Untermyer.
Untermyer is the crucial link here. He was instrumental in creating the Federal Reserve. He co-founded the American Zionist Council, and, get this, he secures Scofield a coveted spot on the Lotus Club's literary committee.
And who was he on that committee with?
With Mark Twain.
Mark Twain. So the argument is that this is a highly unusual amount of coordination for just a study Bible.
It's more than unusual, and Scofield himself, in his own introduction, basically says he wants mass distribution. He writes that he chose the KJV simply because it was the most popular version, to ensure his unique notes would reach the widest possible audience.
So it was a strategic choice.
A very strategic choice. And that intent is also clear in the delivery. There's this long-standing suspicion that the Scofield Bible has always been subsidized by Oxford Press.
Why do they think that?
Because it's always had this consistently low, affordable price, much cheaper than other Bibles of similar quality. It made it accessible, and it allowed it to just saturate Baptist and Southern churches.
The Scofield Southern Bible Belt, as some call it.
That's it. And it helped establish influential institutions like Dallas Theological Seminary, which was started by one of Scofield's disciples.
You mentioned this system, dispensationalism, was described by its own early followers as new wine. For anyone who's new to this debate, what is dispensationalism and why was it so revolutionary?
That is the critical question. Simply put, dispensationalism is a theological system that believes God interacts with humanity through different historical eras or dispensations.
Okay.
And crucially, it says God has two completely separate plans for the future. One plan for the church, that's spiritual believers, and a totally distinct future plan for ethnic, physical Israel.
Which was a huge departure from what was commonly taught, right? The older covenant theology taught that the church is the spiritual fulfillment of Israel.
A dramatic shift. This new system, Scofield system, carved out a dedicated political role for ethnic Israel in the last days. And the sources are quick to point out that respected figures like Charles Spurgeon and George Mueller, they strongly opposed the movement that birthed this doctrine.
So let's get into the theological challenge itself. How did this shift actually happen in the text?
It was a dramatic shift, and it all pivots on textual interpretation. The most critical change discussed in our analysis is in Genesis 12:3. In the traditional King James Bible, God promises the land to Abraham's singular seed.
Singular. And the New Testament, in Galatians 3:16, clarifies that the singular seed is Christ himself.
Precisely. The blessing is fulfilled in Christ. But the critique here is that Scofield's notes and later versions like the NKJV and NIV often change the interpretation of that singular promise to apply to the plural descendants.
And that one grammatical change from singular to plural is everything.
It's profoundly important. It shifts the entire focus of the Abrahamic blessings away from being fulfilled exclusively in Christ and instead applies them to all physical ethnic descendants. It prioritizes physical inheritance over spiritual faith.
So if that's the case, why do supporters of this system insist the land promises still need a future physical fulfillment? I mean, the promise to Abraham was for territory from the Nile to the Euphrates.
And that's a key point of conflict raised by the sources. The dispensationalist position is that those land promises were never fully fulfilled.
But is that true?
Well, the counter-arguments cite multiple Old Testament books, Joshua, Nehemiah, Kings, that clearly record those exact boundaries were achieved historically
Under King Solomon.
under the reign of King Solomon. So the argument is the promise was fulfilled conditionally back then and is now ultimately fulfilled spiritually.
So if the promise has been fulfilled, then what happens to the identity of Israel in the New Testament?
The sources contend the New Testament completely redefines it. Paul writes in Romans 9:6, "They are not all Israel, which are of Israel."
Meaning not everyone who is ethnically Jewish is part of the spiritual Israel.
Exactly. And Paul uses that allegory in Galatians 4, contrasting Isaac, the child of promise, representing the New Jerusalem, with Ishmael, the child of the flesh, who represents the current earthly Jerusalem still in bondage.
So the conclusion they draw is that the true Jew is defined inwardly. It's about being circumcised of the heart.
A born-again believer, regardless of DNA or ethnicity.
And this theological shift from a spiritual identity back to a physical one has had, well, massive, measurable geopolitical consequences.
The figures are startling. The U.S. currently sends over $11 million per day in aid to Israel. Yet one view presented here argues America has actually seen declining blessings since 1948 because of this theological misprioritization.
And you can see this theology informing almost every layer of modern political life. The material notes that basically every major American politician, Republican or Democrat, feels they have to, well, to kiss up to AIPAC.
It's pervasive. It even extends down to state policy. You have states like South Dakota requiring public contractors to sign documents saying they won't boycott Israeli products.
And they're using these NGO definitions of anti-Semitism that critics say could potentially include certain biblical interpretations.
It's a very fine line.
This is where the criticism becomes highly spiritualized. We read about some evangelical churches that display the Israeli flag right on the pulpit. The critics argue this is basically idol worship.
Treating the flag like a lucky rabbit's foot to get a blessing for America.
And the critique extends to the gospel itself. You have Christian leaders, figures like John Hagee or Paula White, who are criticized for suggesting that Christians shouldn't actively try to convert Jewish people.
Right, and the source material characterizes this as loving them to death by denying them the essential Christian message that salvation comes exclusively through Christ.
The sources then move even further into a spiritual warning about the use of the term Shekinah glory. What's the concern there?
The concern is spiritual syncretism. The source material claims that in certain Jewish traditions, the Shekinah is described as the female goddess aspect of Judaism.
A female goddess.
Yes. They relay this anecdote of a tour guide who allegedly claimed this feminine essence seeped down into the Wailing Wall after the temple was destroyed.
So when some prominent Christian leaders use the phrase Shekinah glory, which isn't a term found in the Bible, the criticism is they're accidentally borrowing Kabbalistic language tied to this alleged feminine deity.
That's precisely the argument, and it leads to a direct criticism of the Wailing Wall itself.
How so?
Well, the material has claims from Baptist preachers who compare touching or kissing the Wailing Wall to what they see as idolatry in some Catholic practices, like kissing the stones where Jesus was laid.
They're saying both are just worshiping stones.
In their view, yes.
Okay, let's move toward the future, toward eschatology. The sources reiterate a strong rejection of the pre-rapture 7-year tribulation period. They argue this whole timeline is a novel idea, largely introduced by Scofield's notes.
And it connects right back to the modern state of Israel through the identity of the man of sin, or the Antichrist.
What's the connection?
The sources predict this figure will be a Jew, specifically called the son of perdition, a term also applied to Judas. And this prediction is tied directly to the current geopolitical push for a third temple in Jerusalem.
And the preparation for that third temple, like trying to secure red heifers for animal sacrifices, This is seen as completely satanic in this framework. Why such strong language?
Because in their view, advocating for the return of animal sacrifices is the ultimate rejection of Christ's finished work on the cross.
If Christ's blood was the final, perfect sacrifice.
Then preparing for or financing a renewal of animal sacrifices is seen as actively denying the supremacy of the cross. It is, to them, antichrist.
So if we connect all these dots, the historical, the theological, the geopolitical, the material suggests that the deep political polarization we see now is setting the stage.
For an inevitable future division.
A division among Christians themselves.
That is the ultimate conclusion they draw. They suggest this coming time of difficulty will serve as a purification process, a preening for the American church.
Separating those who prioritize the Bible as their final authority from those who prioritize supporting the modern state of Israel as a religious duty.
A separation of priorities.
What stands out here is this compelling argument that a century-old study Bible acted as this unsuspecting yet incredibly powerful catalyst.
It really did. It reshaped modern evangelical theology, driving the understanding of Israel away from spiritual fulfillment in Christ.
And toward a physical, geopolitical fulfillment.
Which has resulted in the intense political and spiritual debates we're seeing play out today.
I think the critical takeaway for you, the listener, is the unwavering importance of relying strictly on scriptural authority. Not on historical tradition, not on political narratives, not even on seemingly foundational study notes.
So diligence is required.
To anchor your understanding solely to the text itself. This raises an important final question for you to consider. The sources noted that persecution and external challenges have historically always caused the church to multiply and grow stronger.
It's a historical pattern.
So if current friends continue to make Christianity in America, well, uncomfortable, forcing this period of separation and challenge, could this painful process of purification ultimately lead to a powerful spiritual revival, strengthening the faith rather than destroying it?
A provocative thought as you continue to study these connections between ancient texts, modern politics, and faith.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep studying, and we'll see you next time.